It's 6 o'clock. Welcome to the March 19th meeting of the governing body. I call this meeting to order. If you will give your attention to Councilman Duncan, who will provide the invocation, remain standing as you are able, and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mayor. So later this evening, we will go into a session where we have big decisions to make that, not just impact obviously us, but the entire city. And so in that spirit, dear Lord, during these days of conversation and discussion, we seek your wisdom, guidance, courage, and strength. Be with us in our deliberation and help us to be wise in the decisions we make for the good of all those who have placed their trust in our leadership. Give us insight to lead with integrity and make us faithful stewards of those who look to us to make decisions that impact their lives. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right here.
Just hello. Okay. We'll first start with the roll call. Brenda, if you'll read, please.
Mayor Padilla.
Here.
Councilmembers Hiller.
Here.
Valdivia Acala.
Here.
Ortiz.
Here.
Banks.
Here.
Kell.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Dobler.
Here.
Duncan.
Here.
And Hofer.
Here.
All right, we have 10 present.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple of proclamations to read this evening, or recognitions. But before I do that, I just want to put in a real quick plug, depending on where you are in the agenda or what your plans are for this evening. You still have time before 7 o'clock to vote today, just to make sure you're reminded of that opportunity for us today to vote in the presidential primary, something that doesn't happen very often. So if I could have Charlie White and Aiden Smith and Derek Jensen join me up here. You come on up here. Don't be shy. You're on stage, right?
Yeah.
So you shouldn't be stage fright at all. Okay. I want to take this opportunity to address two accomplishments, both with Topeka West High School and Topeka High School, with regards to the arts in our community, something that's very important and very vital in our community, and very active. To the degree that there's been a lot of recognition and awards given to both schools. So on behalf of both schools, I want to read a couple of recognitions and then one that applies to both of them, if I may. As the mayor of the city of Topeka, Kansas, I would like to recognize Topeka High School Theater for winning the 2023 National Outstanding School and Outstanding Impact Award for advocating for theater education and the value of arts in schools. And that's for Topeka High School. And as mayor of the city of Topeka, I would like to recognize Topeka West High School Theater for winning the 2023 Outstanding Impact Award for the second year in a row for advocating for theater education and the value of arts in the schools. Topeka West was also the only school in Kansas to be named a premier school for theater education by the Educational Theater Association in 2023. And for both schools, theater education enriches the lives of countless students in our schools and allows them to discover their myriad skills and abilities in leadership, communication, and collaboration, and unlocks the unlimited potential of the student. Theater is a critical component of the learning process and develops students' creativity, self-discipline, problem-solving, and critical thinking abilities. Research indicates that students with more theater education have higher academic achievement across the curriculum. The importance of theater education is recognized as being necessary for the full development of all students. Theater in Our Schools Month is a special opportunity for our community to engage in the ongoing process of theater education and to bring a heightened awareness of the importance of the arts in education. Therefore, I, Michael A. Padilla, do hereby recognize March 1st through March 31st, 2024 as Theater in Our Schools Month. In witness whereof, I do hereby affix my official signature and the official seal of the City of Topeka, Kansas on this 19th day of March, 2024. So a round of applause for both of these schools, please. Who's Aiden? Okay. Starting right. Would you like to make a comment? Off script. Go ahead.
Yes. You want to go for more? Yeah. As being president at my school, it has been really great just to be able to get theater more seen in our schools, definitely because not only for like me, but others, it has made a really big impact in their life. I've been doing it for over 6-7 years, and it's just changed me a lot. It's broken me out of my shell a lot, so it helps out theater kids a lot.
Thank you.
Good job.
You know what, I'm going to say very similar things, but even over just the last 4 years that I've been in high school, I've seen so much growth and so much more recognition going towards theater in our schools, and having had a very similar experience to my fellow from Topeka High, I can just say that this means so much to us, and this means so much to every single person who has done theater and will do theater in our schools. Thank you. You want to go around?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item number 3, presentations. Madam Clerk?
For the presentations this evening, we have Topeka Planning and Development 2023 Annual Review.
City Manager?
Mayor and governing body, Rihanna Friedman, who is our Planning and Development Director, will make this presentation to you this evening.
Good evening, Mayor, governing body. Okay, so tonight I wanted to come and present an update on our 2023 Annual Planning and Development Review. So during this update, we'll talk a little bit about building permit activity, some of the residential and commercial trends that occurred in 2023, review our top 10 permits, and then just give some general department updates as well. So I have quite a few slides here, but they're very visual, so I'll try to keep things snappy. So building permit activity. So compared to 2022, comparing 2022 to 2023, total building permits have increased 13.7% across the city, from 466 to 530 building permits issued. So talking a little more specifically about housing units, new residential building permits saw an uptick of 17.7% in 2023 over 2022. And you'll see when looking at this slide that additions and alterations permits also increased roughly 34%. So seeing more movement there than in new units built. So I like this next chart. I think it's important. What this does is this data helps break out the city's share of the new dwelling units compared to all of Shawnee County. So in 2023, you'll see that 53.3% of the permits that were issued across the county were located within the city of Topeka. And then I think it's also worth calling out, you'll see there's a spike in 2020 and 2021 on this chart. And that can be attributed to developments like Wheatfield Village, whose permits were pulled within that time frame, bringing on 170 roughly new units. And then Topeka Housing Authority's Cason building project, affordable housing in downtown Topeka. So that attributes to the spike in those 2 years that you see. Future residential, so this is determined here by prime vacant lots located within the city. So what we consider to be prime single 2-family vacant lots are lots that have been platted or zoned since 1970. And then buildable are ones that have streets or existing infrastructure or benefit district in place. So I like this example of using Rockfire at 44th and Croco. I think this does a good job of showing what both of those represent. So you'll see that where existing houses are at, the lots that are vacant between there are buildable, right? Because they've got all their streets, they have all the infrastructure in place, and then highlighted in blue is planned, so a phase 2 potentially, but still making it an accessible planned development. When we pulled together our DGM report for the year, our development growth management report, it really stood out the amount of residential infill that was completed in 2023, so I wanted to highlight that. I know that's something that we're always talking about when we're discussing affordable housing and to help fill that gap in Topeka. So it'll continue to be a focus for us, but of the 82 residential permits that were pulled, 44 of those were made up of infill permits, bringing on 65 new units. So some of these pictures will help show that. So the picture on the left is a Southern Hills duplex project, and then on the right is the East Topeka North Cornerstone infill project as well. Commercial permits, I'm not exactly surprised to see that the numbers are down for commercial permits. That's just something that we're seeing. I think that's happening nationally. And then permit values continue to increase. The cost of development materials, construction materials and supplies continue to increase, increasing the values of the permits that are being issued. So quickly, here's a list of the top 10 permits by value. This includes commercial and residential for 2023. So you'll see to the top, Auburn Washburn Middle School. Obviously, this was a large project. Still work going on there. Give you a second to look through those. And then also just some images to talk about some of the renderings that were provided, and then some of the work that's been done to date out there at Auburn Washburn as well. So these images will help kind of represent some of the other major projects that were on that list. The Stormont Vale Cancer Center addition, Torgerson Electric's new headquarters, which is exciting, as well as Great Plains United Methodist Church. Work is still taking place on that building as we speak. And then lastly, just to provide some quick division updates, I think that, planning, there's a lot of work that's always going on. If you follow Planning Commission, the Historic Holiday Park Neighborhood Plan was just adopted, which is very exciting. But two things I'll call out that I feel like maybe we don't get to talk about as often is the transportation planning side of things. So in 2023, a lot of work was done on the Safe Routes to School plan for 501 elementary schools, talking about infrastructure and policy needs. And then additionally, our Bikeways Phase 5 circulation study. And I think what's really important to call out here is that opening up both of these studies makes it possible for us to apply for future grant funding, which is extremely important in how we continue to help in those areas. So development services, I know last year we saw a lot of code updates that came through, and so Richard Faulkner and his team have done a really good job of trying to make sure that we're in line with neighboring communities and making sure that we're keeping our codes up to date and working with the community as we go to adopt those. But if anybody ever has interest in looking at our DGM reports, this is something that gets posted monthly. So we have monthly reports on our planning website at topeka.org/planning, and then also the annual reports are on there too. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Rihanna. Any questions from the body? Councilman Duncan.
Just a couple quick ones. I know it's easier to track a new build or new development. Do we have any way to track when a house that's been abandoned for 5 years, finally, or do we, when it becomes now habitable because someone's gotten it, rehabbed it basically, and same with commercial properties?
So yes, and we would be tracking that through them pulling permits to do the work. So issuing permits and then having us go on site to do inspections is how we would be tracking that.
I mean, I don't need this tomorrow, and it's going to
Yeah.
be longer, but it'd be nice if over time we could see some of that data just to get an idea of what our rehab looks like in terms of not just the new development. So
Yeah.
if that's possible. And then my other question is, Brent, I mean, have we had any issues or concerns from developers that we're now up to date on all our codes? Or I know there was some talk early that since we were going to be so recent that there could be some hiccups with that. But
You know, I really haven't heard anything. I'm open to any feedback. I will say Development Services does a really good job working through their boards, and the boards are made up of industry folks, so they do a really good job laying out the groundwork for that before it goes into place, but I haven't heard much.
great, thank you.
Councilman Dobler?
Thank you, Mayor. Could we go back quickly to the top 10 list, please? Just a number of these, certainly over half, maybe most of them are properties that are exempt from property tax. Do we track new building permits for non-exempt property? And what that trend looks like?
Yes, we would be tracking all of it, and we could pull that out separately.
That'd be interesting
Yeah,
to know
absolutely.
how that's changed. I mean, these are all great projects, and obviously we need schools and hospitals, maybe the courthouse.
No, you're right. We talked about how it was interesting that there were just some really large public projects that went on in 2023.
Yeah, I think we've seen quite a bit of that recently. So, Thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller?
Thank you. Another kind of open question, if there's not a specific answer for it right now.
Sure.
With the data that you have, has any time been taken to compare what's developing to what was cited in the housing study as needs?
Yes, and I will say there's still a really large gap when it comes to residential, right? I mean, we're tracking it through the RHID, through permits that are pulled, rehabs that are done, but yeah, there's still a gap.
Well, I wondered, because it seems like in that array of all the different goals or what they identified as goals to set, there were a couple of them that were just in the hundreds. And I wondered, just overall, I'd
Yeah.
like to see that at some point when it, if there was some question about the validity of the numbers, I'm okay with that. I just was curious.
Yeah, I think we could definitely pull something like that together. So these numbers are strictly the permits, right? So we would be looking once we have certificates of occupancy and which projects are fully closed out, we could look at trying to pull those and compare them against the housing study to update the needs analysis and provide that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Further questions? Okay. Thank you, Rhiannon, I appreciate it. Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item, number 4, the consent agenda. Brenda, if you will read.
A is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller approving a special event known as Fight Night. B are minutes of the regular meeting of March 12, 2024, and there's one cereal malt beverage application for Topeka Express Stop located at 3101 Southeast 6th Avenue, and staff is recommending approval.
Okay, we've heard the consent agenda is read. Is there a motion to approve? Motion to approve by Councilwoman Hiller,
I'll second.
second by Councilman Miller. We'll use the voting machines
Correct.
tonight because we're all here.
Yep, you can go ahead and start your vote.
Are they ready?
Yep. There we go. Okay, we have 10 yes, the motion carries.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 5, the action items. Brenda, if you will read, please.
A is a resolution introduced by interim city manager Richard Neinstead in accordance with section 1860-010 of the Topeka Municipal Code, approving a conditional use permit to allow operation of a short-term residential rental, type 2, providing lodging to transient guests currently zoned R2 single-family dwelling district and located at 116 Southwest The Drive in the city of Topeka, Shawnee County, Kansas.
Okay. Rita, this is one of the items that requires an ex parte reading. But City Manager, if you'll go ahead first, please.
Mayor and governing body, Dan Warner, our Planning Division Director, will make this presentation to you.
Good evening, Mayor, governing body. So the applicant in this case is requesting a conditional use permit to operate a type 2 short-term rental on the subject property. The property had previously had a permit for a short-term rental, but it expired. The CUP is required in this case because the property can't meet the 500-foot separation requirement that is necessary for a type 2 STR. What happened in this case is when that permit expired or lapsed, somebody moved in and opened another type 2 and kind of got within that 500 feet. Staff is recommending approval of this CUP, and the Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval as well. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Dan? Okay, I do need to, before we vote, I need to read this ex parte communication. Prior to proceeding with the vote, each member of the governing body who is engaged in ex parte communication with any individual, either in favor of or against the matter of being concerned, must state that the communication occurred and indicate that even in light of having engaged in the communication, they were able to fairly, objectively, and impartially consider the measure based only upon the evidence provided on the record. The record includes the Planning Commission minutes, the staff report and its attachments, the public comments made during the Planning Commission hearing, and similar relevant information related to the matter. So having read that, is there anyone on the governing body that wishes to advise of ex parte communication? Councilwoman Hiller.
This property is in my district, and I did attend the neighborhood hearing on it. I don't think there was any information that would affect outside of the information that we have here.
Okay, thanks, Councilwoman. Anyone else? No. Okay, we'll proceed with the voting. There are different voting options on this item. One is to approve the Planning Commission's recommendation. 2, reject or amend the Planning Commission's recommendation. Or 3, remand back to the Planning Commission as required by the governing body. So we can now take a vote. Is there a motion to approve? Councilman Duncan?
I still have a question.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Just a couple quick points of clarification. So with the exception of the foot being not 500 feet, all other ordinances, laws we've put in effect to short-term rentals still apply. This doesn't exempt them from any of those, correct?
Correct.
And then it expires in 2 years?
I believe we have an extension built into this to give them a little more leeway on, as long as they come back and try to renew it again administratively, they can get 2 more years, so.
Okay, but it'd be administered, but at least in 2 years, if there's issues, it gives staff a chance to review any complaints, concerns, problems. Okay,
Exactly.
perfect, thank you.
Further questions? Councilwoman Hiller.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve by Councilwoman Hiller, second by Councilman Kell. If we're ready to vote.
Okay, we have 10 yes, the motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Move on to agenda item 5B. Brenda, if you'll read, please.
B is a resolution introduced by interim city manager Richard Neinstead in accordance with section 1860-010 of the Topeka Municipal Code, approving a conditional use permit for a public utility facility type 2 sanitary sewer pump station on property located at 3500 Northeast Sardu Avenue and zoned R1 single family dwelling district, all being within the city of Topeka, Shawnee County, Kansas.
Okay, City Manager.
Mayor and governing body, Mr. Warner will also handle this.
Mayor, governing body, the City of Topeka Utilities Department wishes to relocate and rebuild a sanitary sewer pump station on the airport property. The city retains an easement for the pump station on the airport property. The pump station is moving about 60 feet to the west of the existing pump station and is located well within the boundary of the airport. and also near to the airport hangars, which are approximately a quarter mile away from Northeast Strait. The new enclosure for the pump station is 80 square feet. Staff recommends approval, and the Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval as well. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Dan? Okay, seeing none. This also, I believe, requires an ex parte communication. Each member of the governing body who is engaged in any ex parte communication with any individual either in favor of or against the matter being considered must state that the communication occurred and indicate that even in light of having engaged in the communication, they were able to fairly, objectively, and impartially consider the measure based only upon the evidence provided on the record. The record includes the Planning Commission minutes, staff's report and its attachments, the public comments made during the Planning Commission hearing, and similar relevant information related to the matter. Are there any ex parte communications to bring forth? Seeing none, we also have the same voting options in this matter. One, to approve the Planning Commission's recommendation. Two, to reject or amend the Planning Commission's recommendation. And three, to remand back to the Planning Commission. So is there a motion to consider?
So moved.
Okay. Motion to approve by Councilwoman Ortiz. Second by Councilman Banks. Ready to vote?
All right, we have 10 yes, the motion carries.
And we have one final item under action items, if the clerk will read, please.
C is acceptance of land dedications in the final plat for Southland Subdivision Number 3 for the right-of-way dedication of Southeast Etzel Avenue and a portion of Southeast Bryant Street, which were previously recorded as access and utility easements in Southland Subdivision Number 2.
Mr. City Manager.
Mayor and governing body, it is Mr. Warner again.
Dan Knight.
Thank you, City Manager. Okay, last one here. So this is a final plat for Southland Sub Number 3. So the purpose of this final plat is for the acceptance of land dedications. This includes a right-of-way dedication for Southeast Etzel Avenue and a portion of Southeast Bryant Street. As Rhiannon mentioned earlier, Southland Subdivision's affordable housing duplex development and is currently under construction. Staff recommended approval, and the Planning Commission unanimously approved this plat.
Okay. Any questions for Dan? Councilwoman Ortiz.
When was this photo taken? Because there's many more duplexes out there.
Right, so I think we were just trying to show an example of one of them, not so much a wide shot, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of development.
It's looking good.
Yeah.
Further questions? Okay. This also requires an ex parte communication. Prior to proceeding to the vote, each member of the governing body who is engaged in ex parte communication with any individual, either in favor of or against the matter being considered, must state that the communication occurred and indicate that even in light of having engaged in the communication, they were able to fairly, objectively, and impartially consider the measure based only upon the evidence provided on the record. The record includes the Planning Commission minutes, the staff report and its attachments, the public comments made during the Planning Commission hearing, and similar relevant information related to the matter. So, are there any ex parte communications to be brought forth? Councilman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had communications with Mr. Palmer. It's looking good out there. I asked to put a hard helmet on, but it's not time to go out there, but it's really bright in that area, I tell you. So I have, and I can fairly make a great vote decision.
Okay, we have the same options for the governing body may accept the governing body may accept the dedications of land for public purposes. Governing body may refuse to accept the dedications if it determines that the plat does not comply with the subdivision regulations. or 3, the governing body may defer action to allow for modifications necessary to comply with the subdivision regulations. Is there a motion from the body?
Move to approve the allocation.
Okay. Motion to approve by Councilman Carroll, seconded by Councilman Banks. When we're ready to vote.
Councilmember Miller? Councilmember Miller? Thank you.
I apologize.
Sorry.
I thought I hit that button.
That's calling you, really.
So used to
All
hearing
right, we
it
have
and waiting
10
for my
yes,
turn.
the motion carries. Right.
Okay. All right. That completes our action items. We'll move on to agenda item 6, non-action items. Brenda, if you will read.
A is discussion of the proposed 2025 to 2034 CIP and the 2025 to 2027 CIP.
Mr. City Manager.
Mayor and governing body, Sylvia Davis, Utilities Director, and her Utilities Deputy Director, Nicole Malott, will lead this discussion. Or maybe Josh will.
Or Josh Malott.
Good evening, Mayor and governing body.
Read the script.
Tonight's the third night of the CIP, and last week, obviously, we did Public Works with Braxton, but tonight we'll let Sylvia drive, and she will talk about utilities projects for water, stormwater, and wastewater.
Director?
All right, good evening, governing body. Utilities has done a lot of work to have a data-driven approach to managing our assets. Many of you have heard us talk. It's not even been a year since we were up here going through the 2024 CIP. So much of what you will see tonight might be redundant for those of you that are new. I know we walked through a little bit of this with you, so I'm not going to try to rush through it, but this is 25 slides, and I want to make sure I'm respectful of everyone's time. So we'll save some time for questions in the midway and then at the end of the presentation. But if you have something that comes up, just let me know. We will start out. Rosie, are you controlling this? I can? Okay. So our programs, as you know, utility manages water, stormwater, and wastewater assets. We do that a couple of different ways through the implementation of programs and then standalone projects. We're going to start with our programs tonight. Utilizing that programmatical approach really works well for us. It helps us be flexible and adapt to different emergencies as they arise, and it really allows us to work with Public Works much more closely and stretch our dollars as we look to measure our priority projects against their street projects and where we can overlap and address some things. We try to do that, be more efficient and effective with our dollars. So our first program is our water main replacement program. I want to call attention to 2025. In your book, you will have a different number than we show here. That is due to adjusting funds that we had set aside for the Elevation Parkway project. We knew that we needed to have some reserves set aside for that in the event we moved forward with that project. Now that you guys have adjusted, we're flexing too and putting those dollars back into our water main replacement program. And then again, later on, I'll draw attention to that in our sanitary sewer program. Some of the examples of these projects, again, these are tentative projects, are listed here. If you have specific questions, I'm happy to answer those, but our goal is to maintain that 150-year replacement cycle, and this funding that we have here allows us to do that, and we could not do that without those rate increases that you all approved at the end of 2023. So because it's 2024, we're diving in, and 2025 is just another look at what we have planned for dollars in the future. Some potential or some projects that we have in place that are not listed up here is the Villa West Drive project. We have a project in Highcrest neighborhood, Western to Western to Buchanan along 21st Street is an active project as well. So that just kind of shows you how we've set this up, and we're presenting it to you, as we don't want to set anything in stone, so we can remain flexible, but we do have planned projects based on our priority needs and those of partnership with Public Works. The meter vault replacement program 2024 was our first year of this funding being available to us, and so we're still planning in that planning stage. We had set aside $675,000 a year to continue this program so that we can start making an impact on replacing the 140 large meter vaults that we have. A large meter vault is for any meter that is 2 inches in size or larger. I would like to highlight, last year we told you that we thought this funding would allow us to replace between 4 and 5 of those vaults per year. When we started getting those estimates back, we thought our dollars were going farther, so we thought maybe 10 to 12. However, we've done a lot of work working with our engineers, consulting engineers, some of our consultants, and other communities looking at their technical specifications, and we've changed some of our specifications so that we can get more readily available material, and that right now we're looking at the potential of replacing 20 of these a year. So instead of a 12-year-long program to cycle through all of these, we're hoping to get closer to a 7-year cycle through that. So I'm proud of staff for diving in and taking the time to do that and find some efficiencies there. Next, we have the water treatment plant rehabilitation program. This funding sets aside monies for us to do various improvements that are needed on these plants that are very aged. If we have a major project, we will call that out as a standalone project. I have some of those at the end of this presentation, but this program allows us to have those monies there to address any potential security updates that we might need, address things that came out of our risk and resiliency plan, we have some small roof projects that we need to get done, and then one large project that we are planning for, do some different electrical and HVAC repairs so that we can address that ongoing maintenance of the plant. These annual water programs that we have listed on slide 7, these are smaller cash-funded programs. They include our water tower rehabilitation program, which allows us to address 1 tower a year approximately. That could be recoating, repainting, cleaning, inspection. We have our valve and hydrant rehab program that we asked you guys to approve funding for 2024, and we're doing that again for 2025. We have a long-standing need to address our valve and hydrants across the city, and this program is what's going to allow us to do that. Normally, you would see that come out of somebody's operating budget, but due to lack of staffing and available resources, we just have not been able to dedicate the time to really be responsive to that. So this funding, right now, we are using the 2024 funding to develop that master plan, get a project going so that we can then have priorities out of that. And hopefully the goal is to get those improvements addressed so that we can have a much less impact on our customers when we have water main breaks and need to shut off various components of our system. Lastly, on this slide, you will see the water equipment and fleet program. You'll see that in stormwater and wastewater as well. Unfortunately, this is where we oftentimes have to cut. If there's a need to cut, it usually comes out of our fleet repair and replacement programs. However, you all know the impact of deferred maintenance on equipment, and in 2023, we were not able to fund that, and however, 2024, we were able to allocate those funds back, and we would like to continue to do that. Utilities between stormwater, wastewater, and water, we have approximately $30 million in equipment and vehicle assets. And that's a lot of money. When something goes down, we're often in a bind because we have over 300 pieces of equipment and vehicles, there's a lot of people vying for those dollars. So that's why we have $400,000 set aside in 2025 for our water assets. And then you'll see that reflected in stormwater and wastewater as well. All right, so moving along to stormwater. Braxton was successful in getting some projects approved last week that he called out specific stormwater funding for. This is the program that that allows us to do that work in conjunction with his projects. So we have a priority list based on our stormwater master plan and various flood studies, and then we also try to be responsive to other needs as they come up. Some other examples of projects you'll see are the area of 5th and Liberty, and then Cherokee and Jewel. We have some additional projects under consideration around the Central Park area, Fillmore and 21st, and this really addresses our rehab and replacement needs. We have a lot of corrugated metal pipe throughout the city that has seen its age and its life. It's beyond life expectancy, and it's all failing at the same time. So there's a great need out there that we now are well aware of and trying to address through this funding. Our stormwater rehab program for our pump stations. I think I spoke with you last year about the fact that our stormwater pump stations have been kind of the forgotten asset out there because we haven't had a major flood event in so long that where we would have to activate these pump stations, but we want to make sure that they're functioning if that need does arise. So we have combined dollars in 25 and 26 so that we can address the most immediate need, which is that Quincy stormwater pump station. And then we have funds set aside to look at City Park pump station improvements next. All right, the annual stormwater programs, these again are cash funded as well. So we have dollars set aside for our levee asset repair and rehab program, our drainage correction program, the stream and channel restoration program, our fleet and equipment maintenance program, and then our best management practices program. So our levee assets, I think everyone is well aware of the vast network that we have of our levee system and how integral that is to protecting the city. And so we have to always be able to react to anything that might come out of the routine inspections that are done on that levee system. The DCP, we call it the DCP program, the Drainage Correction Program, this is very citizen-driven program where we respond to complaints, where we have drainage issues that affect 2 or more properties, where we might have an undersized drainage system, or something where a development upstream has now impacted an existing development downstream. This program helps us react to those and allows us to fund about 3 to 4 projects a year. The stream and channel restoration program, that is very important to allow us to respond and keep our channels open and flowing so that we don't have major backups in the stormwater system. If we do have erosion that happens, you'll often see that in some of the areas of town where we have a lot of development up and along those channels. Oftentimes the erosion issues that we have will impact the parks path network, the trails system across the city. So we have had to use these funds to address immediate concerns when we've had major rain events that might result in erosion that could undermine some of those trails. So that is what that program is used for. And then, again, our fleet maintenance program, where we have $300,000 set aside in 2025 to address the stormwater assets. And then last but not least, our BMP program. So the first three programs you see up there really address flooding, so water, stormwater quantity issues, but the city is also required to address quality issues and look at different ways to treat that stormwater as it flows down our streets and into our system. So this BMP program helps us have funds that can not only address potential flooding like detention needs that we might have, but also apply green infrastructure where possible to get some water quality benefit. And we like to use those funds wherever we can, where it makes the most sense. We've had some pain points along the way, and we don't want to force quality if it's not practical for the application. However, that's what this program is called out for. All right, so now we're moving on to the wastewater programs. We have our wastewater pump station rehab program. This funding, these projects are prioritized based off of some condition assessments that we've been working on over the past couple of years. We are looking at being able to address between 1 and 3 pump stations annually with this funding. We've been able to eliminate a couple of pump stations. One that you just approved tonight, Billard, that is something that would have been funded out of this project. So our wastewater lining and replacement program, all of this work is really a preventative approach. This allows us to address needs before they become emergency needs, where we would then require costly open cut replacement. So our engineer has really done a great job of this more proactive approach and looking at televising our system by quarter section, so about a quarter of a mile section at a time, and reviewing what the condition of those underground assets are, and then where we need to apply, where it's best to apply this approach as opposed to just replacing the infrastructure altogether. I would like to note an increase of $1.4 million because of that elevation parkway adjustment here as well. Also, the 17th Street East, that came out of an assessment of the 17th Street JADO project. So again, these programs allow us to flex and coordinate. All right, so along with our wastewater assets, we have our force main replacement program. These are our pressurized lines. They're often costly, require bypass pumping, et cetera. So this just helps us stay on top of the replacement cycles that we really need to be in to be more responsible and not wait until something is in dire need. And then we have to spend more to address those needs. And so you'll see this is really size that we've broken these down to make sure we're addressing the various components of our system and not leaving anything behind. So the pressurized force main program, and then we have the sanitary sewer interceptor program. That's the larger gravity fed lines that we address with this. South Shunga Interceptor are examples of current projects that are being undertaken as we speak. Grant Jefferson Interceptor as well. And so then we have some future potential projects of different interceptors that we're looking at addressing with this funding. Because the extent, these projects are extensive, they're much larger, and we have a lot going on, as you'll see after we're done. So to be able to manage the time frames associated with that, we've combined funding, and you'll see that we have dollars set aside for 2025 and 2027. And then we move into those annual wastewater programs that are all cash funded. So we have a facility rehab program, much like water, where we're addressing needs that arise at our North Topeka and Oakland wastewater treatment plants. We have an odor control program that we kicked off that we're still studying and trying to implement projects to see what impact those have to our customers. an I&I inflow and infiltration program, and then the wastewater plant operations fleet maintenance program there. So you'll see $350,000 set aside for that. The odor control program really is starting in 2025. We have some studies that we have undertaken, and we're looking at that and determining where we can use these funds. Currently, we have a very reactive approach. We use a lot of chemical odor control approaches, and it's very reactionary, and we need some proactive needs that we need to address so that we can stretch those dollars farther and stop spending so much money on chemical additives that are just placed in whenever we're getting complaints. That's not a great approach to managing odor in a system. And so this funding, it's a lot, as you see, but it's really needed to look at what we have that may or may not be working, and then as we might utilize different technologies, how that impacts downstream of our system. All right, so I think I'll stop there. Those were our programs. And then if we have something that we have pulled out as standalone projects, we'll go into those next, but I'll pause for questions.
Okay. Councilman Kell and then Councilwoman Hiller.
I really like the lining aspect. It's, to me, a lot more cost effective and gets a little more life out of it rather than having to go in and tear up everything. The lining program is something I really like. Now, on the pump stations, like the one in the photo there, I think was pump station 2 on slide 11. That's nearly a 100-year-old building. Have you looked at maybe replacing the building rather than rehabbing to get it set up for more of what's needed nowadays rather than the way it was probably set up 100 years ago?
Absolutely. That's our oldest pump station, I believe, in the city. And that, I think you all have, it's been a while. We need to probably revisit that and let you know where we're at with that project. There is a complete redesign of this.
My thinking is maybe long-term, it's maybe more cost-effective to replace rather than rehab.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and this one has some historical value, so we did some redesign work to address that and capture some of the spirit of this amazing infrastructure that's lasted so long, but also our current and future needs.
And honestly, I'd want to almost keep it up because it does have some historical value in neighborhoods. You know, I was just kind of looking through, and it's actually means something to the people in that area that has been there so long and been part of their neighborhood that I wouldn't recommend tearing it down, but maybe just build something right next to it that can maybe go the distance a lot longer.
We'll revisit that for you all and make sure. I know some of you have been really involved in that design, and I think you'll note we've saved the keystone there and are incorporating that into the new approach. But we'll revisit that and bring it back to you guys.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm working from the book and trying to figure out. And so you scooted through the wastewater projects, which are on page 35 of the book. And I'm looking, just to clarify, for instance, your force main replacement program is big in 25, 26, and 27, but then there is nothing the next years after that. Is that because you're done, or you're just balancing projects? Using that as an example, because you have some others like that.
We're not done. We are never done, but we also have rates approved through 2026, and we're looking at what can we afford. So right now, if we can't afford with our existing funding, then we have to have nothing there. So those are things that we're looking at as we go.
Oh, that's one of the reasons I asked. And so what you're showing then in 28, 29, 30, and beyond is where there is money in there, that would be the priority on the dollars that the current rates are producing. Yep. And so the blanks are where you would pass if you have to.
Correct.
Thank you.
We wouldn't, we will have to address all of that when we start talking about the next round of potential rate increases or what our budget's looking like.
And I did have one other, on the wastewater treatment plant, is that what we are hoping to get reimbursement for?
Not yet. I'll get that project here
Okay.
at the
that's
end.
fine.
Yep, it's really close to the end.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Dobler.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick comment. I think this last week we got a letter from the fire chief indicating that the city of Topeka had received another high ISO rating, which directly affects what we all pay for insurance, house insurance. And he noted, and I'm glad he did this, 50% of that's the fire department, and they did a great job. 40% is the water system. If we weren't doing what we're doing right now in terms of main replacement, tower rehab, those type of things in the distribution system, ultimately what we would see is a decline in that ISO rating, and our insurance rates would go up. So, thank you, Mayor.
Other questions, sir? Okay. Sylvia, go ahead and proceed.
All right, we will dive into our standalone projects. Some of our funds might look like we aren't doing much in 2025, but that's simply because we have a lot going on now from 2023 that is just extended out a little bit longer, and then 2024 projects. So I'll note those along the way. Many of these stem from our various master plans as well. So we've really tried to take a more data-driven approach and look at what is existing, what we've paid money to study, and what those studies tell us, so that we can use that data to make good decisions. To Councilman Dobler's point, our water distribution system is divided into zones, and the first projects we'll look at are the zone optimization projects. That is funding that is allocated towards various projects to help address hydraulic issues in the system. Do we have adequate fire flow, fire protection? Do we have water quality issues that we could address by putting a loop into the system? Domestic service needs. Those are all things that can be improved with these optimization projects. In 2025, the funding that we've identified is dedicated towards the central zone and the west zone, and oftentimes you'll see us constructing new lines or replacing transmission lines with this funding through these projects. All right, the west intake, this is, you guys saw this last year, so I don't want to belabor this, but there is a huge need for some valve mechanical issues, electrical issues at our intakes. Our intake structures, if we don't have those, we don't have water to clean and provide to our citizens. So the immediate need is for the west intake. And then as we wrap that project up, we're going to dive right into the east intake. It's a little bit newer, so that we can, so it can stay a little bit longer before we address that. But that west intake, I'll just remind you that was built in 1956, so it's withstood the test of time, but it needs some TLC. So that's what this $6.8 million is going towards. The West Filter Rehab Project, that is a $5 million project to address our media and filter system at the plant. This directly impacts the quality of our water that we distribute through the plant and out to our system. We need new media, and then we need the new wash system to help maintain that media so that it doesn't get clogged and we can get its useful life out of it. Active water projects, like I said, we have several that are still ongoing. So I just wanted to take a little bit of time and note those. We have the West Plant Rehab project that is addressing some issues with our clarification basins. We have the West Elevated Tank, the Indian Hills Road. That's the picture that you see here. We've been trying to make sure we update you through our weekly reports of the progress of that tower project. And then, of course, the Polk Quincy Viaduct relocation work that we need to do. Those are very active projects that are taking a lot of attention so that we can get those wrapped up. Moving into stormwater, the standout project for Prairie Road is approximately 2,600 feet of storm sewer. That helps us address some significant flooding that we saw in July of 2020. The study that we did in this area shows that we could have potential damage to 21 homes in the event of a 100-year flood event. So this project will help mitigate those potential damages. We also have a stormwater project set aside for California and Southeast 4th Street. Again, this follows recommendations from our stormwater master plan. It includes the construction of a 9x7 reinforced concrete box that will help alleviate flooding along 4th and 5th Streets and will help limit any potential impacts to the elementary school that's nearby. Active stormwater projects that are currently ongoing, again, addressing that old CMP that's failing. We have a project that extends along Fairlawn from 22nd Park to 28th Street, and then the stormwater improvements needed for the Polk Quincy Viaduct relocation work. Wastewater, we have, this is the project that Councilwoman Hiller was referencing, I believe. So during the cold snap in January, much of our attention was drawn to the issues we had at the water treatment plant and the water main breaks we saw and the resulting boil water advisory. However, at that same time, we had an emergency at the wastewater treatment plant where we had some lines freeze up that caused a lot of damage to one of our primary digesters and then some secondary damages to another. So current estimates, we've had some engineers out looking at this and helping us develop an emergency plan to address the need, and we cannot go for extended periods of time down multiple digesters as we try to treat our wastewater and adjust to the North Topeka wastewater project that's ongoing. Again, we're really in a predicament here. So we are trying to get funding through FEMA to address the potential costs for this. If we don't get that funding, we will look to fund this through revenue bonds, and then we'll have to look at what we're going to need to adjust in those other programs to accommodate that. But right now, the estimates that we are seeing are about $9.9 million. So it's very expensive. However, this is absolutely a priority need. Ongoing active wastewater projects, I have several listed here. Again, that North Topeka nutrient removal project, the Grant Jefferson pump station, the Shunga pump station, our sledge thickening project at Oakland, and we have some backup generators that we're installing at Oakland, and then the wastewater work associated with the Polk Quincy project. So lots of work going on. And I just wanted to say a huge thanks to our asset management team and our finance team, our utilities staff that has really been working side by side with finance staff and public works staff, because this is, you guys know, it's a massive CIP, and we're just trying to get the most out of these funds and make a good impact, but also not be too conflictual when we see the needs that arise and the impact that we have on these projects out in the community.
Thank you, Sylvia. Questions for the director? Okay.
Okay.
Steen, and thank you very much for the
Thank you.
presentation. Okay, we'll move to agenda item number 6B, if the clerk will read.
B is discussion regarding the establishment of a ready reserve fund to be comprised of unassigned general fund reserves.
City Manager.
Mayor and governing body, I will defer to Council Member Neil Dobler on this issue.
Councilman?
Thank you, Mayor. So we talked a little bit about this last week, and I had to ask the city attorney and staff to draft something. This really turns into just a discussion tonight, I think, about how we want to move forward. So basically, the idea is we have fought to maintain reserves much above 15% for 20, 30 years. I mean, it's been difficult, but the last 4 or 5 years, through a number of things, the inflation accounts for part of it, sales tax, revenue's gone up, certainly the valuation, even though we've cut the mill levy 3 mills over the last couple of years, we still collect more property tax, and that ultimately amounts to excess funds at the end of the year. We have a policy that says we should have 15% reserve. So whatever our general fund budget, 15% of that, and we've been able to maintain that through the hard work of finance and the council over the last several years. In the last couple of years, it has skyrocketed, really. I think we've seen 27, 28%, which is really too much. I think we'll see the downside of that eventually. Cutting the mill levy is probably going to mean not as much in terms of excess this year, but we'll see. The issue now is we do have excess over what we should be holding for restricted reserve. So my proposal simply, at this time of year when we close the books on the previous year, we look at what's left, and out of that we reserve 20% for restricted reserves, our emergency reserve fund that we don't touch unless we absolutely need to. And anything above that 20% goes into and actually I like the wording here, unrestricted, unassigned general fund reserve. I think last week I called it ready reserve. Somebody said that's a military term. So, okay. But, you know, this year it'd probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of $7, $8 million. I guess $8.5 million is what we saw last week that would go into an unrestricted reserve fund. And then we would develop guidelines on what that can be used for. We talked last week about equipment replacement, capital projects that we can do without bonding, and then some for emergencies and disaster recovery, things that come up. And I think we saw several good examples of those type of things in the list that staff presented us last week. I don't really disagree with any of those. I just think we should go through those one at a time. With this policy, they would come before the Policy and Finance Committee for approval and then move to the council. They would come one at a time. They would have to meet these requirements. And I think that does 2 or 3 things. It lets us, instead of getting all of these projects, spending all the money day one at the beginning of the year, look at trying to vet these projects quickly. It allows staff to meter those out over the year. We would expect that money to be spent on good things during the year, but not necessarily all at once. They would bring those to a committee, the Policy and Finance Committee, which would have a chance to vet that, and then they would come to council. I think the other thing it does is it does add to our emergency reserves a little bit. So, you know, you're halfway through the year and projections are looking good and there's no recession on the horizon, you go ahead and spend the rest of those funds. We know how quickly things can change. We saw that in 2008. We saw it in 2020. We get partway through the year and haven't spent those funds yet, and something does happen, we have the opportunity to roll those into our reserve, and you know, at that point they become an emergency reserve fund. So that's the general concept that I think I tried to lay forward last week. Certainly open to any suggestions, and I'll follow Councilman Duncan's philosophy. You can pass it, you can not pass it. It's just a thought on what we might do to somewhat manage these excess funds that we've seen in the last few years. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Councilwoman Ortiz, and then City Manager.
Thank you. I was always told we have to have a certain amount in reserves. to keep our ratings, our A ratings. So does that keep us with that, I don't know who the question's for, but does that keep us with a certain amount in reserves to keep our bond ratings good?
Michelle?
That is a great question, and yes, 15% is the floor set by rating agencies, so maintaining between 15 and 20 would be one contributing factor towards our rating, but it doesn't guarantee we keep it. But staying there is always a positive indicator and a good scoring item for us to keep our rating.
I just know as long as I've sat on here, we've never had any extra in reserves. You know, we've always been told that we couldn't use it, so this is kind of new. I'm not saying I don't like it, but I just wanted to make sure that we keep enough in reserves for our ratings. Thank you.
City Manager?
So, Mayor and governing body, this is a good approach. This is a good, sound approach. I've been on enough church boards to understand what happens when there's a large influx of cash into a church. And this is a discussion that they ought, well, at least we Lutherans, but this is a discussion that they ought to have. This is a good, solid approach. You're not spending the money away. You're actually being able to see how that reserve is benefiting the city and benefiting the taxpayers and benefiting this, your reserves at the same time, so.
Further comment? Councilwoman Hiller?
I feel like I'm raining on that parade just a little bit, but I have a couple of comments. One, I don't mind voting on things one at a time, whether we do it with the list that was proposed to us a couple weeks ago or another way. If that helps people not feel stressed about voting in a whole list in at once, I'm fine with that. I could support this, except I will share with you that I had my preliminary budget meeting today, and the finance staff provided just a simple chart that was projections of income and expenses out only to 2027. And what they mentioned is that with these projections, which are sort of business as usual heading forward, those do not include any pending labor negotiations. And we are all, with this projection, we would be at only 19% by 2027, and that's without 3% increases or whatever to some a major part of our workforce. So I think everybody maybe would want to have this in mind, in that if this is a 1 or 2 year happenstance, as Councilwoman Ortiz said, I've not seen it this high either, ever. And it's not going to be a forever situation. Maybe we don't need to create that bureaucracy, and that extra fund is a consideration for me. Also, the suggestion that it be in policy and finance, because most of these are likely to be infrastructure, if it were set up to go through a committee, I would think maybe infrastructure would be the most appropriate. But again, flexible, those are just some comments, having thought about it, and again, having had my preliminary budget meeting today with finance. Thank you.
Further comments? Councilman Duncan?
I like the idea for several reasons. I think every year I haven't liked the process of, we have extra money, you got a week to figure out how we're going to spend millions of dollars. And that doesn't mean I don't trust staff, because I do. And to Councilman Dover's point, their recommendations are usually good. But it's real hard to review in a week this sudden, quickly, millions of dollars, let's figure it out. And not having some breathing room has always frustrated me a little, and I think this gives us that. And I appreciate the projections from staff because they're usually pretty accurate, but I'll point out, I went back and looked, in the last 4 years, we've had a little over $17 million of excess money at the end of the last 4 years if you add it all up. So even in the years when we knew it was going to be lean, we've still always ended up with something extra at the end. The last 3 years, it was about $3 million, give or take, and then this year it's $8 million. So yes, that can change, and you have to plan for the worst, right, and hope for the best. But I mean, I think we've shown, and at least for the time being, that they're, at worst, we're going to be flat, I think, for a while. And so So I think it's a safe way for us to not lose those funds, but also not feel that rush of, oh my gosh, spend it right now or else. And so I'm supportive of that, and I think it keeps our options open, which I like. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? If I may.
Go ahead.
I would support the proposal. I don't know that if there's any consideration, Councilman, that you might consider something more than the 20%, maybe 21% or something, if there's fudge there. But what I like is the idea that, as Councilman Duncan says, you get this influx of funds and you want to be able to use it in a productive way, but it's hard to take all that information in and feel comfortable with making the voting decision. What I'm concerned about is how it appears to the public. I think when you're able to do it that way, as suggested by Councilman Dobler, that people who are paying attention to what we're doing and voting for will see impact more readily than a big package of projects passed all at once. Because the question always comes, well, how does that affect me? Is it in my area? Is it necessary? I think given focused attention to each one that we consider in that way, lets the public hear what we've considered to be most impactful for the community and then move forward with it. So I like that approach, that it makes it clearer, not just for the governing body, but for the public who is asking, how are our dollars being spent? So I like that aspect of the proposal. So thank you, sir. Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you. I encourage everybody that hasn't had their budget meeting to do it. One of the things they pointed out, to Councilman Duncan's point, is that one of the reasons we had that money at the end of the last few years, as everyone knows, is because we couldn't hire. We were very, very short on staff. And we have heard some very encouraging reports from the fire department, for instance, from code compliance, that they're now staffed up. And that's wonderful, but that means that we won't have those kinds of voids in the budget that we have had recently. So I appreciate the staff. They still left a vacancy factor in the projections that I referenced, but it's only like about a 5%, 5 to 8%, I think. So just a caution. Also, one of the reasons I have liked this year-end thing, and everybody knows that I'm oriented toward us reducing debt, because it is a net multiplied savings for us. It saves that money on those particular projects, but then it releases dollars also for future that can be spent on more direct service rather than financing. So, and I think that the single year-end list of whatever that number is agreed by the council lets us make those decisions and let staff know exactly that we're going to make those switches if, for instance, we're going to pay for a project with cash instead of bond it at the right time of year so they can plan around it. So again, just my thoughts and conversation. Thank you.
Further discussion, Councilman Banks.
Thank you, Mayor. In the proposal, I heard equipment. So I'd like to have an idea of the equipment. What type of equipment? Are we talking trucks, or equipment for the fire department, those types of things?
Councilman Dover.
Obviously open to suggestions, but in my mind, it's equipment that we would have to bond for instance. I think last week we saw a paint truck was on that list. I think they actually found funding for that. So maybe some just paying cash for some emergency kind of equipment, but really I think to get to the heart of it, we're talking about bigger pieces of most likely fire equipment that we would have to bond.
Thank you, Councilman Dover.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Further discussion? Okay. Well, food for thought. Thank you very much, Councilman Dover. Okay, we'll move on then. Thank you, Rochelle. Josh? Okay, next we have on the agenda is public comment. We have 5 people signed up for public comment this evening, and I'll read them off in the order that I believe they were received. Melissa Weichel. Melissa Weichel.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Melissa Weichel, and I'm a board member of the Topeka Justice, Unity, and Ministry Project, JUMP. After our many visits last summer, we are here once again to implore each of you to agree to move forward with the next step in utilizing the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That next step is quite straightforward. It requires this governing body to appoint members to the Affordable Housing Review Committee, set a meeting date for the committee so that they can issue requests for proposals to housing developers. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund has been idle for almost 1 year. It's been idle since April the 11th of last year. It's been idle holding the city's required initial funding goal. It's been idle with $1 million ready to fund affordable housing for our neighbors. It's been idle because a committee hasn't been appointed and a meeting hasn't been set. This is not a major funding allocation we're talking about. This is simply appointing people to a committee and having that committee meet. Affordable housing is not just an issue, it is a fundamental human right. And don't you agree that every member of our community deserves a safe, decent, and affordable place to call home, regardless of their income? One of our JUMP members who's here tonight, Jessie Homerdine, and her family struggled to find affordable housing when they first came to Topeka. All of the rentals here with more than 2 bedrooms west of Gage were okay and in good shape, but there was barely enough room for her family of 5. And the rent was maxing out her husband's salary as a sergeant in the Army. Not just his basic housing allowance, but also his salary. That's just a small part of her experience with housing in Topeka, and she's certainly not the only one. Meanwhile, the cost of housing continues to climb, making it increasingly difficult for many hardworking families and individuals to find affordable places to live in our community. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund still represents an invaluable resource that can address this crisis head on. By convening the review committee and activating the trust fund, the city can channel the necessary resources to create more affordable housing for those in need. Affordable housing trust funds are active and thriving in communities all across the United States. Here in Kansas, trust funds are active and working to address the housing crisis. So why is the capital city of Kansas not doing the same? We're glad to hear that other housing tools like the land bank are making good progress, as we're sure they will help with Topeka's affordable housing crisis. However, it's very disappointing to see that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, in particular, is not being prioritized by this council. For our newer council members, please know that the citywide housing market study advised that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is the #1 solution for Topeka to adopt.
Ma'am, your time is up. Do you require more time?
Yes, sir.
How much?
Probably a minute.
Okay. Motion to approve for a minute. Second by Councilman Miller. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Proceed.
Thank you, sir. The study that that study that the city council paid for in 2020. That was 4 years ago. We believe that you want to ensure that Topeka's homelessness crisis does not continue to worsen. So why aren't you utilizing every tool at your disposal, especially the Affordable Housing Trust Fund? It's established, it's funded, it's ready to work for Topekans to create more affordable apartments and homes. All it takes is appointing a review committee, scheduling and holding a meeting to issue requests for proposals to developers, and that is what we're asking of you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, second, Ricardo Arzate. Ricardo Arzate. Okay, you know him? Okay. Next, we have Rachel Hamilton. Rachel Hamilton. Rachel Hamilton. Okay. Cassie Martin. Cassie Martin. There you go, Cassie.
Good evening, governing body. My name is Cassie Martin, and I am a senior in the social work program at Washburn University. I'm here today as a deeply concerned student and community member. Topeka Metro is failing our city. Throughout this school year, I've been engaged with a practicum at the YWCA Center for Safety and Empowerment. To clarify, I am not here representing the YWCA, but rather reflecting on my experiences I've had as an intern advocate. I quickly became disheartened when I noticed that one of the main services we provide is assistance with bus passes. I was shocked to find out how lackluster Topeka Metro services truly are, especially considering the enormous cost to riders. While there is a reduced fare option, it is extremely restrictive. This unnecessarily creates a barrier for so many Topekans needing access to affordable transportation. The reduced fare application must be completed, signed, and stamped by a physician or social service agency that is legally able to certify a disability. Many low-income folks do not have a primary physician, and there are very few service providers licensed to document a disability within Topeka. Service agencies that are capable of this certification often have waitlists of 3+ months to access services. Almost all of my clients at the YWCA fall into this service gap, yet they rely on Topeka Metro for their everyday transportation needs, and they rely on us to supply the bus ticket. Reduced fare service should be exponentially expanded with the end goal of 100% cost-free bus services in mind. Beyond the cost barrier, Topeka Metro fails to support those already gainfully employed or attempting to gain employment in our city. Major employers in the Topeka area urgently need employees to cover evening and weekend hours. Target and Dillon stores are open until 10 p.m., while all 5 Walmart stores are open until 11 p.m. Target Distribution Center, Walmart Distribution Center, Reese's, Smucker's, U.S. Foods, Goodyear, Frito-Lay, and Mars all need employees to be working evening and overnight shifts. Despite this, no bus service is available in the evenings or on Sundays. This lack of service is detrimental to individual economic freedom and stability. Topeka Metro has a responsibility to its riders and community members to expand service hours. Service hours should be immediately expanded to span from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. daily, with the goal of 24/7 bus service in mind. My clients are not the only Topekans seeking an improvement in Topeka Metro services. Washburn University students cannot ride the bus home from evening classes that wrap up at 8:30 p.m. International students at Washburn struggle to get off campus without vehicles. I urge you all to consider reducing service fares and expanding service hours. Yesterday afternoon, a group of students passed along the same message at the Topeka Metro board meeting. Change is long overdue. As city council members, I urge you to use your position, influence, and access to funding in order to fix this urgent issue. Topeka's life depends on having public transportation as a useful community asset. As it stands, Topeka Metro is failing to fulfill that role. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Henry McClure.
I'd like her to be my spokesperson. Neil. Good evening, Your Honor. How are you?
Fine.
Nice to see you. Cheers. Mace Siegel and Rich Cohen formed the Mace Rich Company back in the 60s to expand a discount department store to come through the Midwest. They met Dana K. Anderson here in Topeka, and from that really formed the Mace Rich Company. And they, of course, they developed where the old Gordman's was, and then they were the second owners of White Lakes. And then they pivoted to the mall business. And from White Lakes, they became the third largest mall owner in the country. They're traded on the New York Stock Exchange, and you can see their symbol at MAC. They, over time, we made a living renovating old malls in college towns, and we became so successful we could actually buy good malls. We're half owners. I get to say we because I own a few shares of stock. But Mace Rich owns half interest in the Country Club Plaza in Kansas City, Mo, with Alfred Todman. Alfred Todman is one of the top mall developers in the country. So we just lost 2 large tenants in Country Club Plaza due to the fact that the real estate taxes are $44 a square foot. So you can't make it. Forever 21 was one of the big people that had to pull out. They're basically an anchor department store, kind of a junior anchor, ladies ready to wear, high fashion. And that's what you need in malls. But they can't afford the $44 a square foot in real estate taxes. And I'm telling you, this is coming to a neighborhood. If we don't start bringing our real estate taxes down, the same thing is going to happen here in Topeka, Kansas. It's just kind of the way the trends work. As a landlord, you know, our job is to put people in business and put the right people next to them and make sure they succeed. Over the years, we succeeded because we kept our operating expenses down and did our best to merchandise the properties appropriately. So I emailed you guys earlier the ballot question, the ballot that we voted on 20 years ago in 14. And the ballot was economic development, and that's all it said. And I think the interlocal agreement has taken poetic license with the economic development. And you got to start thinking about funding small people. I beg to differ with the glowing report. If nobody heard me that Pizza Hut's almost taken 2 years to come into town, well, let me tell you about that. I wish Sterling Scott was here to talk to you about some of the issues. I'm not speaking for him, but I'll tell you, I did talk to Howard Paul, who's been a successful real estate developer. I'll bet the people up on Highway 24 would love to have a Brahms. And we lost that. So it's not really as slick as we're hearing it from your planning director to try to do business in this city. Thanks for your time.
Okay, seeing no further people signed up for public comment, we will move to announcements. Brenda?
And there's no meeting next week.
That was quick. I like that. City manager? Nothing? Okay. Start with the governing body. Councilman Duncan.
Nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Councilwoman Hofer.
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Hiller.
Nothing.
Deputy Mayor Valdivia-Alcala.
I need about 20 minutes. Wait, no, just joking. I have nothing.
You don't accumulate time. So nothing? Oh, okay. Just want to make sure. Yeah. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Well, I didn't know if you were talking to me about accumulating time, but I will. Couple of things that I wanted to say. Last year, there was a mishap with the Harlem Globetrotters. They'll be back this week, and I hope we would give them that Topeka proud love that I know that we have when they come here. They're a great family team that comes and puts on an event every year, and I just hope we show out and show them how much that Topeka really does love them. On a brighter note, Blake Red served the Topeka Fire Department for 32 years of service. That's a lot of years. And yesterday, he walked out. I was talking to the interim chief. I said, I wish I'd have knew, because I'd have went out there, and his colleagues, friends, loved ones, they all watched him walk out, met him, and the honor guard did their little thing for him. It was really, really neat to see that. And I think that as I believe, third generation firefighter, it was awesome, because he just lost his father this year. So that's the kind of things I like to see with our employees, that they support each other. But 32 years of service, it's awesome. It's awesome. So if you get a chance and you see him out and about, just tell him congratulations.
Mm-hmm.
I think
well, if he's listening, let's give him a round of applause right now.
Yeah, we can do that. And I know, everybody says those are my guys, those are my boys, but, it had to be said. It just had to be said. I also want to thank the finance team that has been meeting with me and going over the CIP. It's been very interesting to see what you forget, what you know. I'll just call it touch of dementia. That's what I tell them, but they've been awesome as well. So again, I just want to thank them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Banks.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councilman Kell.
First, I'd like to thank Councilman Ortiz. Usually that no one has anything, and it comes to the loudmouth over here. First off, reiterate what Councilman Ortiz said about Blake Red. That's amazing. 3 generations and as much time as they put in. If I remember right, there was no overlap between all 3, but for that many years of family serving Topeka is pretty amazing. This weekend, we also had Irish Fest. That was an amazing event to be at. There was a parade, and then Evergy Plaza was just filled up. I was helping out a booth when I was down there and volunteering, and it was just really fun to be around. No incidences that I saw at all, which was amazing there. Culturally, it was neat to hear the music, see different things. So I'm glad Evergy is there for us to use. I've been saying for a couple of years that let's use that as our main parade hub, and it kind of felt like that's what it was this time around. Lastly, I want to touch on the emergency management blowing the horns the other day. I know a lot of people have been upset about this, but I would much rather than see them blow the tornado sirens like they did and at least alert people that there's something in the area than blow them too late or not blow them at all. To me, there are so many people upset about it, but my wife and I were just driving down Kansas Avenue and we heard them, and there was no alert on our phone. We weren't at home. First thing we did is flip over to 580 to listen to what they had going on, but if you weren't alerted any other way, at least that way it put us in the know if something was in our area. And I'd much rather have it be on the side of caution than wait until it's too late and putting people in danger. So please remember that they're making judgment calls, and I would much always rather anyone in an emergency situation err on the side of caution than wait too late. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Miller.
Nothing today. Thank you very much.
Councilman Dover.
Well, I'm going to take like 30 seconds here, I think. A couple of months ago, we had a water mishap after the extreme low temperatures, and we had a boil water order, and I know we all received lots of emails, and most of them were just asking questions, as you would expect people to do. A few of them were, how could, only in Topeka, how could we let this happen, and on. And my wife and I went to Grand Rapids, Michigan for about 5 days to see one of our kids. And Grand Rapids, if you don't know, is a nice town, about 200,000, well-run, growing. Guess what? Boil water order. Apparently they had a huge water main break on Sunday and nobody caught it in time and drained a tower. And when that happens, you create a vacuum and suck bad things into the system. So they're still under the boil water order. So it does happen. It happens in bigger cities. It happens in smaller cities. And the reaction there was almost identical here. Schools had to close, coffee shops, restaurants closing down. City was proactive. But it looked exactly like the response here. Well run, well maintained. You do what you have to do. You get through the crisis and move on. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I would like to follow up on Councilman Kell's comments about the parade. I know that because of the incident in Kansas City, Missouri during the Chiefs parade, there were a lot of people who were a little apprehensive about what is the city doing to prepare for that kind of a gathering. And I know from visiting with Chief Wheelis, he was ahead of everybody else in making plans and making sure that he had the appropriate coverage for the event. And you could see it all along the route. And that was probably one of the larger crowds I've ever seen for a parade. It was 3 and 4 rows deep of people. And like I said, when we went by Evergy Plaza, it was just packed. And then on 8th Street over there where they were having that concert in front of the Celtic Fox, it was packed as well. And Topeka's not prone to those kinds of mass shootings that have been experienced across the country, but that doesn't mean it couldn't happen here. But I feel comfortable and grateful to the chief and the department and all the officers that he had deployed for making it safe and keeping it safe for us, knowing that at any time something could go wrong like anywhere else, even with all the plans in place. But it's heartening to know that we have an agency that's ahead of the game and doesn't wait till something happens and then respond, but they're there immediately to help out. And so I want to thank the chief and the department for their efforts. And Deputy Fire Chief Tony, thank you for everything that you guys did. You guys kept scaring me with that big old horn on the back of that truck that was behind us, but it was a good turnout, and I appreciate everything that the department provided during that time for the parade as well. And give our congrats to the chief for having a successful stay at the hospital and back doing well, I understand. So it's good to hear. Okay, so there is, with no other announcements to be had, there is a need for one executive session. If we could have the attorney for us today, Nick, if you would read the need for the executive session, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion would be to recess into executive session for a time period not to exceed 2 hours to discuss applicants for city manager as allowed under KSA 75-4319B1. The open meeting will resume in the city council chambers. The following staff are necessary to assist the governing body in its deliberation: interim city manager Neinstedt, Shelby Harville, and any other staff he finds necessary.
Okay, you've heard the need for an executive session. Is there a motion to move into session? Move into session by Councilman Dobler. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dobler. Did I say Dobler?
I have the same haircut. Jeez, come on now.
Well, between you and Dobler and Nick, by Councilman Kell, a second by Councilman Miller. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We will recess. Give yourselves 10 minutes to break before we get into discussion. Did I say Dover? Okay. We have completed our discussions in the executive session. No action has been taken. There being no further business to come before this body, the meeting is adjourned.
Yeah.